May 24th. Call this meeting to order, and I'll go through Planning Commission members. I'm Heather Lind. I'm here. Howard Tritz.
Here.
Abby Dahlman.
Here.
Bryce Ehrlich.
Here.
Aaron Palin.
Here.
And then Lupe did let us know that he wasn't going to be able to make it this evening. He had a conflict. Roll call of county commissioners. I have Commissioner Mudge.
Here.
And then Commissioner Marcella, did she make it on yet? And then I know Commissioner Fiedler let us know that he would not be able to make it either this evening. Do we have any changes or additions to the agenda? Okay, we have the minutes that were sent for May 10th. And then staff updates. Did we? I apologize. I don't think I saw the minutes.
I don't have any minutes.
Okay. Okay. I just want to make sure I didn't miss them. Okay. So we'll table minutes. Can we get us any staff updates? I know Ann had a few.
Yes, I wanted to announce that the board has made an appointment of Aaron Palin as a voting member to the Planning Commission and Lupe Bobadilla as an alternate. The board did go into discussion regarding the appointments and asked that staff bring back their decision with the appointments, and also they wanted to get the Planning Commission's input on considering the at-large applicants as well as the existing application that we have for a past member. And so they would like to kind of broaden perhaps the search for the alternate position. And so they ask that staff bring that request back to the Planning Commission to vet that outcome and see next steps. And other than that, I don't think if we have time afterwards this evening, after our 2 public hearings, we will, I'd love to provide an update on backcountry. The other outcome was that the board provided support to staff to move forward into a code amendment for the Planning Commission and staff to work collaboratively on preparing the code amendment. So that was the other direction that was given to staff. Regarding the actions that we've taken to them for support.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ann. So on the Planning Commission, we still have an alternate position available. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I think that Sarah is saying in the chat, there wasn't really a discuss about going to running an ad again for additional interested parties. But if the PC wants to do that, that is certainly an option as well. So yeah, definitely wanted to volley it back to the Planning Commission for thoughts and consideration.
Okay. And I know that I received an email from Commissioner Mudge on one of the applicants for the Planning Commission. Did other people get an email? Others on the Planning Commission get an email also?
I received it.
Okay.
I also.
Okay, so everybody has that.
I just think in terms of process, if we can just plan to interview anyone in addition to receiving the letter, that would be, if we can build that amount of time in, I think that would be super helpful.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that. I think my initial reaction to this is that I personally, I think my vote would be that we push back that our commission member Boyle be appointed to that spot. He attends so many community meetings and has a ton of great knowledge and has always provided us with really great knowledge that I think has been super helpful to us on applications in the past. So I don't think there's me personally, I don't think there's any reason to send this back out to advertisement. I think I 100% disagree that there's any kind of conflict of interest with Commissioner Boyle being appointed on the Planning Commission. But that's just me singularly voicing that. What are other people's thoughts on the steps we should take for filling that spot?
Fritz would agree with you entirely on Steve Boyle. The influence he's had on our meetings in the past has been tremendous. And I'd be all for continuing with Steve.
I see Commissioner Mudge just is reiterating that there are letters of interest from Max Cohen and Jason Hall as well. And we did look at those, and I agree with Abby. If that's the direction the commissioners would like to go, then interviews should be a part of that. The email from Commissioner Mudge was, kind of alluding that Jason Hall wasn't a good fit. I think that, again, if the commissioners are asking for the Planning Commission's opinion, then we should give that. But ultimately, I guess they can choose to not take that. So I think it has to be kind of a voice of everybody here on the Planning Commission as far as what their thoughts are moving this forward. But it definitely needs to move in some direction.
I think at this point, it's worth having interviews with the other two candidates.
Would we have interviews with all three again? I mean, I still think our first recommendation is where I personally lie, but if we go through interviews, do we want to do all three? Or do we know one enough not to?
I mean, I'm in favor of interviewing everyone again. That's fine. I think to make a good decision, we should at least have Max and Jason in to, talk to them.
Others' thoughts? Abby, did you have thoughts on that, or?
No, I think, I don't have really strong opinions on, I guess I haven't worked as much with Steve, so I don't feel as, I've been on a few calls with him. He seems wonderful. I think he's on right now too. So, I think I'm fine either way. But if we just want to, I think starting a good process for anything going forward, I think is kind of my biggest takeaway out of this is if we just do it consistently the same way every time, then we'll hopefully avoid kind of the uncertainty going forward. So I guess that's maybe where I would probably be in that same camp of just interviewing everyone, so everyone has a fair chance for that seat.
Any other thoughts from folks? I'll also just point out that we did go through this and we did make a decision and we did push it to the commissioners, and they're pushing it back to us again. So I don't know that interviews were necessarily lacking with our last decision. We had made a decision and put it forward with the idea that we didn't feel the interviews were necessary for those two recommendations that we made. So I think I'm feeling a little bit pigeonholed into one decision right now that we're being asked to make with both the email and then this being pushed back. It seems like we're being pigeonholed into making the decision with one candidate. And if that's the route the commissioners are going to go, then I kind of want them to just go that route rather than spending a lot of time and energy doing interviews. So I guess I would ask Commissioner Mudge if you feel that the decision is going to be that you're going to, likely say no to both Commissioner Boyle and Jason Hall, then is this a wasted effort to go through interviews with these other two candidates?
I can only speak for myself personally, and so everybody understands too. I had a great conversation with Steve, and there is nothing that Steve has ever done that would cause me concern. I just think we have an opportunity to not be in that position, and so I prefer to make a decision based on that fact. And yeah, I mean, for me, I think there's one clear person that rises as far as like a good fit and being very thoughtful for the good of the community and having been active. But I can't speak for the board. And if you want to volley that to the board's sole discretion without any other input, that's okay as well.
Okay, I guess like an informal vote amongst, if each planning commissioner can kind of say how they'd like to see this move forward. And then we can move on to the next items of business.
Heather, this is Howard. Like I said before, I do favor Steve because I've worked with him and I know how he operates and they do a great job. However, in being absolutely fair, we should interview the other two, and who knows, that one of them may be so spectacular they're going to change my mind. So I would have to agree with Aaron and Abby and Bryce that probably the best way is to interview the other two. And I will not be prejudiced in that.
I think that because you and I are probably the only ones on here that have experience with Steve Boyle, I think it would be beneficial to have it with all three, as if we're just so that everybody can, because I don't think anybody's really worked that. I mean, this is going to be our first application for several of our planning commission members here. So,
on the other thing also is maybe one of these people stand out that they would be good, and one of us is going to be leaving, who knows when, and that would be kind of like an ace in the hole.
right. So does everybody want to move forward with that, asking staff to arrange, and do we want everybody on here to be a part of those? What does everybody want to do? Do you want everybody on it? Do we want a few people on those interviews? What's the best?
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we do put all three on this interview course.
But how many planning commission members? Do we have all of the planning commission members who can make it go to the interview?
would it be helpful if I just did a follow-up email with like a doodle poll of potential days? I can reach out to the applicants, try to come up with a few days, and then we can maybe narrow down who would like to participate in the interview process. When we previously did it, I think we did meet the candidates and do you want somebody present from the board? But I could kind of help facilitate this after tonight's meeting to pick a date and who would like to be included. I can do that after the meeting to just try to kind of facilitate that a little bit if it's helpful.
Sure. Sure. I'm just trying, I know that last time when we talked about interviews, there were a few people that thought only a couple people should be there to not overwhelm the people having the interview. So I was just trying to iron that detail out here, because if there are 5 of us making the decision, do all 5 people want to be present for those interviews in order to feel like they're making an informed decision? We need to kind of work through, I guess, that piece. In the past, we had done where just a couple people went to the interview. So it, obviously can go lots of ways.
Great point. Last time, I think we had 2 planning commission members and 1 commissioner, I think, for the previous, and staff was there to facilitate.
Mm-hmm.
If my schedule allows, I'm happy to participate. I think maybe if we could get, some of the older members and newer members, a mix of the 2, that could be helpful.
Cool. So, maybe to your point, Anne, if you just do a doodle poll and we see how many people can make it to certain days, then we just have to kind of wing it from there. If there's, a good amount of planning commission members and the candidate, obviously, then it may be different people going to different interviews.
It can be that. And then if the majority of us can end up making it to both, we can also pick a question, like someone asking the questions, like 1 or 2 people. So it doesn't get overwhelming.
Sure. Okay, great. Thanks, Anne. There wasn't anything else on staff updates that we needed? Okay. New business, we have file 21-01, which is the Leadville Lake County Fire Rescue or First Response, Training Facility, CUP. And what we'll do here, as far as process tonight, we're going to allow staff to read off their staff report, give a little bit of information. We'll then turn it over to the applicant, anybody who wants to speak on behalf of that. And then we'll open up public hearing and take public comment at that point. Any questions? Okay. All right. The floor is yours, Anne.
I think this one's mine.
Oh, sorry, Paul, it's you.
I'm going to do my best to not read the staff report. And I'll try and be as brief as I can in the interest of time. I also noticed in my opening paragraph of what the proposal is, I called it the Headwaters Training Facility, or HTC for short. Well, that doesn't work. It's the Headwaters Training Center. And it is located south of town on a 50-acre parcel that borders the County Road 11A, which goes down towards the Lake County gravel pit. It also drives by Centennial Heights. And then there are a few 35-acre parcels a little bit further south than that we may be hearing from some of the individuals. I think that the large intent of the applicant here is to demonstrate that they're only going to be on 10 of the 50 acres. And at the furthest southern end of it. I think that staff presented in the staff report a rather extensive list of the uses that this is intended to address. And perhaps maybe a little more than maybe an overly extensive list, and I'll get to that in a moment. But there are a couple of really positive actions about this facility. And that is the collaboration that exists between the college and the Leadville Lake County Fire Rescue. From what I can see in this application, it is a strong collaboration between the two, and it may actually get more extensive and in the future. And I think that I would like to say that a collaboration like this is a fundamental component to a growing community. And having said that, I will say that it is abundantly obvious to Ann and I, and maybe to everybody else, that we are a growing community. I think that there has been a number of years here where we weren't, but I can tell you that the last few, we're not. We're a growing community. I have asked the applicant, Sean Simon and I have briefly discussed some of the things that I'd like for him to touch on when he makes a presentation. And one of them is the reference to things like props and instructional cabanas and burn room and clean room. And his application, I think what happens to most of us is that we get so involved in a particular topic that we're talking about that we forget that maybe we're also going to be talking with lay people about this. I can say that we sent out several referrals, many of which were not responded to. Public Works in particular had no concerns about this, but the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment had a rather extensive concern. And I think that Sean has also been in touch with them. Is that right, Sean? Have you? Okay. You can speak to that as well. But I think that some of the concerns were hazardous materials and waste management. And I think that Sean can speak to that they don't intend to store any particular chemicals. I think also there is another concern by the Water Quality Control Division with particular reference to the a sort of a percolation pond that the facility intends to use water on the site. I mean, that only makes sense to me that this is an emergency responder training facility, and fire training is going to be paramount. So water is going to be used quite a bit, and there's going to be a need for water impoundment and perhaps percolation back into the aquifer. This is something that I think that the Division of Water Resources will weigh in. I think the Water Quality Control Division will have a lot to say about it. But I think that this is just some hoops that the fire department is going to have to go through. I think that there was an extensive discussion concerning the visual impact of this particular use. And I think that I applaud the applicant in creating something that they are actually giving a name to, which is the Visual Impact Mitigation Plan. I think Sean can speak a little bit better to that, but I think one of their intended goals is to have this, from a distance at least, as closely approximate what a ranch might actually look like, at least from a distance. I think that Sean can speak to the public benefit of a use like this, and I would reiterate that the collaboration between the college and the Leadville Lake County Fire Rescue is something that is something that should be occurring. One of the concerns that staff has is that of a law enforcement training facility. And I'm not really able to expound more on what staff's concern is. Sean and I talked about it briefly this morning. But my main concern here is, I guess, that as a first responder training facility, law enforcement is absolutely going to be a first responder. But I also see peace officers or law enforcement in being somewhat more than just emergency responders. And my question, and I hope Sean is able to speak to this a little bit more, is that maybe that should be set aside until such time as that can be better explained. And I do propose a condition of approval in that regard. But it may also be that the Planning Commission may not have any such concerns, that there is enough of a relationship between law enforcement and first responders that is actually of no concern. I think one of the things, though, that, and as I move on, that one of the things that was done a couple of years ago is I attended, along with a couple of members of the fire department and a couple of members of elected and appointed staff. We drove over to Gunnison to see what their facility was. And it was basically a bunch of stacked, I think three shipping containers high. And the connections between the shipping containers was changed every once in a while. And the idea there was to be able to generate smoke within these shipping containers and train the fire staff in how to deal with smoke-filled rooms and be able to find their bearings. I don't know how much this facility is intending to address that, but I had indicated at that time that, with a discussion with the Gunnison building official, that he didn't require a building permit. And I said, okay, then I guess I won't either. It never occurred to me that perhaps I need to be looking at requiring a conditional use permit. And that's a failing on my part. And I do that every once in a while. And will be able to testify to that. But I think that there is going to actually be enough actual construction going on that I think many of those things are going to require a building permit. And I'd like to reserve the right to be able to indicate at the time which of these uses out there are going to require a building permit or not. I might also say that shipping containers as a base of construction, we get a lot of requests in this office about being able to do that. We do discourage people from it. There is no a ban in Lake County on shipping containers. And I'm sure you've seen that, all of us have seen some sitting around. It's really hard for us to consider that shipping containers are attractive. They really aren't. But I have to say also that the applicant is stacking these containers and adding enough construction to these containers that perhaps, that at least from a distance, that the appearance of shipping containers is being mitigated to an extent possible. And so I am leaving that to the Planning Commission to decide whether or not that's an issue or not. I don't know. I think Sean is going to have to tell us a little bit more about what his what their intent of those shipping containers is. They don't need to be insulated. They, which, and they're probably not going to be electrified or provide any water to them. So that, because that's one of the major concerns that staff has when people ask, hey, can I use a shipping container as a construction, as a construction base? And we generally tell them, well, you know, you're going to lose a lot of space when you insulate these things and put in plumbing and put in heating and electricity. And we often find that people start to realize that shipping containers are not the great base that they think they are. In any case, those issues do not exist in this particular circumstance. The applicant extensively and very extensively addressed our approval criteria that we use in order to be able to make findings. And I can only applaud the applicant in his detailed presentation in his application. And we very much appreciated his initial identification of concerns and issues, and then his subsequent addressing of them. It would really be nice if all conditional use permit applicants were as thorough as this. I have staff recommendations. One of them is that the law enforcement training needs to be better detailed. And then I've presented the staff findings, and then also an alternative motion if the Planning Commission should so choose, but staff does recommend approval. And with that, I wonder if any of the planning commissioners have any questions for me before we move into any discussion by Sean. Doesn't sound like it. Sean, you want to go into some of those details that I skipped over?
Sure. Thank you, Paul. I'm trying to think of where to start. I will start by saying thank you, everyone, for your time. And I will do my best to be brief, but I want to be to the point. I want to make sure that I'm able to answer anyone's questions. Some years ago, we as an agency decided that we needed to have a way to train locally. We are always sending people outside of our community to train, and it's not a very cost-effective way to do so. And then with turnover, we end up losing the benefit that we get from all the money we spend in training. So the idea of a joint training facility kind of started to gain a little momentum. And the reason we want this to be an emergency responder training facility is simply because we do understand the constraints of our community. So with that, we want to be a place where everybody can train both individually and then collectively, all of the emergency responders within the community. To move forward with from there, the first thing I think that I'll speak to is the collaboration between CMC and Leadville Fire. So today, CMC is funding part of my salary. I started teaching for CMC in 2008 in their fire science program, and we've been, both Leadville Fire and Colorado Mountain College have been working together to further the development of their associate's degree program, which Leadville Fire benefits from directly. We continue to see every year there's an academy put on. I've been the lead instructor for a number of years. I'm going to do it again this year as part of my job description. And we've had other instructors lead it up, but they've all been through the academy and they've worked for Leadville Fire at some point in their careers. Some have moved on, some are still here with us. So absolutely, the collaboration between CMC and Leadville Fire continues to grow and evolve. And just the fact that we were able to get them on board with this position and moving forward, wanting to train firefighters in Lake County. And I don't know if you're aware, currently CMC Timberline does offer a fire academy. The candidates and instructors have to travel to Docero to use the burn facility. So that's another benefit that we're going to have, is being able to keep the people that sign up to go to school in Lake County. We'll be able to keep them in Lake County. And as we do every year with Academy, we'll attract people from out of state and out of town as well. So, with that, I'll move over to I'll move to the visual impact minimization plan. It was always our intent to be a good neighbor. We recognize the views that we have here. I've been in this community since '93, and I currently live in Summit, but I've been working here the last 15 years. So I understand what we have here and how special it is. And I understand that some people may not want something like this in their backyard. That's why it was important, and it was always our intent to make it look appropriate for the location. And that's where we come up with the working ranch or farmhouse concept. And so if you have been through the packet and you see Exhibit H, I think that kind of shows it a little bit, as well as Exhibit I, and that's that first building. And so we're going to soften those boxes by putting roof lines on there that make it look more appropriate as a large farmhouse, a large ranch house. Again, the plan for the large front porch is both functional as well as hopefully visually appealing. Same with the parapet roof. And we anticipate that those may need construction permits, so that's not a problem. The painting of them, it's kind of interesting. We moved into the conditional use permit. The day that I bought the sprayer, I was going to go out and start painting, and I found out that we are now going to move into the conditional use permitting process. So we've got the sprayer. We're excited to get moving forward on the project, should we be approved. And the idea is an earth tone, like a brown earth tone. I've heard green. I think brown is a better kind of representative of a ranch house versus the green. I think it'll also show less dirt, less scarring, as we train and utilize the building. So that's kind of the, and we've excavated about 8 feet of material initially to put the first stack of containers in. The idea, draw that down, and then we take the material that we scrubbed out of there and we build the berms on the side to, again, over time, plant those berms, natural grasses, sage, kind of the same concept that was used up at the Lake County pit. There's a berm, and that's kind of what we're trying to go for. So we'll continue to work on that through this process. Visual. So using containers as a base. The structural points of the containers are the 4 corners, which allows us to stack them. And now we can, as Paul indicated, cut passages from container to container, and then be able to frame out and move, have movable walls, so to speak. So I think there might have been some misunderstanding with the portability. It is not our intent to tear this building down and get a crane and re-erect it later. The idea is to utilize it in its current state, but the inside walls will be movable. And as none of those are load bearing, it's going to be typical building construction, 16-inch centers with OSB to create the feel of an interior wall. We're not going to put a lot of emphasis on making it pretty on the inside, because honestly, it will often be dark and smoky. That is the actual intent. It's the same as the Gunnison prop. And I obviously understand that this is something that I've been working on. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. I'm trying to think of where to hit next. I'll move into the difference between the two main buildings. So we have what we've called a clean building, and I know that staff addressed that. And actually, let me back up. I will speak more to what the difference between a prop and an instructional cabana is, because that was highlighted in what I received. Prop is simply a training prop. In other words, something that we use to train on a specific skill or a number of skills. The instructional cabanas are simply a shaded spot where we'll be able to store equipment for that prop and be able to gather outside, be able to have an outdoor, somewhat sheltered, not four sides, but at least a roof and a wind block, to be able to discuss how the evolution went and any kind of questions or concerns with how we move forward and what it is we're training on. So I hope that kind of clears the difference between prop and instructional cabana. And if I'm not sure, my first CUP, I'm not sure if we can ask and answer questions now, or if we just need to move through the rest of the presentation.
Sean, could you tell us a little bit more about what a burn building is and what a clean room is?
Absolutely.
Okay, Paul, just a minute, just to clarify that question of order. Yes, what we'll do is we'll let you continue with your presentation, and then there will be an opportunity for planning commissioners and county commissioners to ask questions, and then it will open up to public for comments and questions. We'll wait till when we do public, we'll wait for everybody's to come in, and then you can kind of address those.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So the difference between the clean building and the burn building, that exhibit H that you're looking at right now, that's the clean building. And so the idea there is that all of the training that we can do with fire conditions, and for law enforcement, that would be their, clearing a room, large scale incident, active shooter, they would want to use the burn building or the dirty bit building to be able to work with tear gas or pepper spray or any of their less lethal rounds. They'd be able to do that in the burn building / dirty building, however you want to phrase that. The burn building will have active fire in it, deliberately set. The clean building will not. We will be able to replicate all trainings in there to include throwing ladders inside and outside, but there is no intent to start fires. So it's more of a clean place for us to train, where we don't have to worry about the carcinogens involved with the live fire training. We don't have to worry about taking a company out of service to be able to train because they're into a live fire. We don't need the extra instructional overhead to be able to run evolutions, because again, there's no live fire component. So that's kind of the importance between the two different buildings and the difference between the two. In addition to that, the clean room or clean building will have water, sewer, electric. It'll have, a small classroom component, extractors to clean our personal protective equipment after we're done training with live fire. And it will be able to, maybe most importantly, house our fire apparatus. So it'll be a warm place to plug in our fire apparatus and keep them available for the training that we'll be doing. The burn building, there's no sewer, there's no electric, there's no water. It is truly a prop. It gives us the ability in one building to replicate all of our target hazards in our community. I hope that kind of clarifies it a little bit. And of course, any questions, keep them coming.
Just so I could pop that one up here, because these aren't labeled as a burn building. Which one is that one?
That one right there, Exhibit I,
Yep.
that is the burn building.
Okay.
And that's the building that is
Thank you.
currently
I just
there.
wanted to make sure I had the right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then the Exhibit H has the clean, it has a picture. And then more specifically, Exhibit J is and again, this is just a conceptual drawing. We don't have plans or anything engineered yet. Of course, we would have to go through that whole process, but we wanted to have something for this so that the Planning Commission and commissioners could understand our intent moving forward. Does that make sense?
Sounds good. Are you ready to field some questions?
Or
do you have some more?
Well, I'll speak briefly to the to staff's point and to Paul's point about the police training. We are absolutely spearheading this, but our hope, our idea, our effort is going to go towards collaborating with all of the emergency response agencies. So I can't tell you exactly how the police officers are going to use this facility, but in speaking kind of at the boot on the ground level with our local law enforcement, they want a building to be able to practice clearing rooms. They want to practice active shooter drills and have it be able to be then taken to a school, but they want to practice it someplace where they don't have to worry about any liability or getting in the way of students and learning. We'll also be able to train jointly on vehicle extrication. And again, Leadville being the community it is, and one of the reasons I absolutely love to work here is whenever there's a 911, we seem to all go. And so it only makes sense that we're all training together. So, speaking to, what are the differences between local law enforcement and potential for posts to come in? I don't know. I know that local law enforcement would want to, and this goes back to our brief conversation, Paul, local law enforcement is going to want to practice evasive driving as well. And so I think having a skid pad out there, a driving pad, that not only is a place for us to be able to certify fire engine operators, but it also allows law enforcement a place to practice evasive driving. It offers EMS the opportunity to get driver operator certification for the level of vehicle that they're operating. Right down to, and we've talked with Mr. Irwin over at Public Works, as well as the good folks over at the street department about how hard is it for you to get CDL training, and certainly this could be a place where we can do that as well. So that's kind of, again, it's kind of tough for me to tell you the differences. I'm in the fire business. I'm not in the law enforcement, but I know the value of us being able to have a home to train together and to work together at. As far as like shooting, there's already a range out there that local law enforcement uses. So we don't anticipate the need for that because it is just right there. What else? We talked about the containers. I'm just looking briefly to see if there's anything else that stood out. Paul, please feel free to chime in. Just talked about post. The last thing I'll say about the post, what I wouldn't want, and again, we're very early in talking with Colorado Mountain College. They've just started to move their, this last year, they just moved from the Glenwood campus up to the Breckenridge campus. And what we understand is it's not a very good place to put on the post training. In other words, they're having to go to multiple different locations to get the all of the disciplines met that they need. In speaking with them briefly, what we're proposing to do out there on County Road 11A would be a one-stop shop for them. And that's why we think it's attractive. Whether they take us up on that or not, we'll see what the future brings. But I would just hate for there to be a process that slows any kind of collaboration with Colorado Mountain College for the potential for post to come out. So, and I don't know how else to say that. I guess with that, I'm absolutely ready to field questions.
Great, thank you, John.
Thank you.
Okay, so just a reminder quickly, what we'll do here is first we're going to let Planning Commission comment and ask any questions with, as well as County Commissioners, and then we'll open up for public comment. I know that Anne gave me a nice little speech here that I need to make. Let me just open it up here. Sorry, so many screens trying to do things.
Heather, I might mention that I do have a letter that I've been asked to read into the record at your convenience.
Yeah, so I'm going to let any public that wishes to speak tonight, as well as letters, will go, just needs to, if you can send a note in the chat directly to Ann, your name that you wish to speak. And actually, if you're even present for this meeting, if you don't mind, if your name isn't on your Zoom information, if you don't mind sending that to Ann so she can make note of the people present here today, that'd be great. If you want to speak, make public comment, or ask any questions, if you can also please just send a chat directly to Ann, she'll take note and she'll keep a list, and then we'll go through that person by person, just so that we have a little bit of, Zoom is a whole different world as far as trying to keep order in here. So if we can do that, that would be helpful. And then I'll go ahead and just read the opening statement for how public hearing starts from here. Lake County Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners are now conducting a joint public hearing. The statement I am reading shall be incorporated into and made part of the record on these proceedings. The Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners have jurisdiction to conduct a joint public hearing on a conditional use permit application under section 3.6.1 of the Lake County Land Development Code. The purpose of this hearing is to consider whether the conditional use permit application should be approved. In considering that matter, the Commission will address the approval criteria set forth in section 3.6.1.f of the Lake County Land Development Code. Copies of those approval criteria have been placed on the podium. They're not on the podium, but they're part of the packet. The procedure will be followed in this hearing as number one, the members of the commission and/or the board will disclose any ex parte communications. Number two, county staff will make their initial presentation. The applicant may then make their presentation. After that, any other persons either supporting or opposing the application may present evidence. Such presentations, if we can just try to limit them to a couple minutes apiece, that would be helpful. And if other people have made comments prior to that you're in agreement with, please feel free to note so. Supporting and opposing witnesses may be questioned by the commission and the board. Once questioning is concluded, no further questioning is permitted unless granted by the chair. The applicant may then present any rebuttal evidence. The parties and witnesses are asked to not submit redundant, irrelevant, or cumulative evidence. If someone has already made the point that you wish to make, simply say so. The chair will also require that all comments be made to the Planning Commission and to the board, and that there be no dialogue between the applicant and members of the audience. At the conclusion of the evidentiary portion of the hearing, the chair will entertain a motion to close the evidentiary portion of the hearing, and the commission will discuss and weigh the evidence. Then there will be a motion to close the discussion phase of the joint public hearing. The Board of County Commissioners will then leave the meeting, and the chair of the Planning Commission will entertain a motion on the application. The motion may take the form of one of the following recommendations. Either approve the application with no conditions, approve the application with the recommended conditions, approve the application with newly identified conditions, or deny the application. The planning director shall make record of any substantial discussion on the motion and include that in the record with the recommendation of the commission. The commission's recommendation will be in the form of a statement of motion. Are there any objections to the jurisdiction of the commission or to the form or substance of these proceedings? Okay, hearing none, I will now ask if any planning commission or county commissioner, if you have any ex parte communication that needs to be disclosed at this time. Okay,
I don't have any,
okay. We will continue forward then with any questions. We'll start with any questions from the planning commissioner or county commissioners at this time for the applicant.
I have one. I'd like to see that first drawing first. Can you get it back up,
I sure can.
please?
Yeah. Might take me a second. But... Okay.
Okay, that's good. And Mike,
This one? Okay.
yeah, I'm a little bit confused of where these containers, these C boxes, are they right here where you're putting the plus? Those are them, right? Okay.
Yeah, and I think here and here.
Okay. And on the ends. All right, that was my only question. Thank you.
And quickly, this over here is the site kind of plan, just to clarify for folks. Okay, any other initial questions from Planning Commission or County Commissioners?
Heather, this is Kayla. Oh, sorry, did I cut somebody off? Abby, you can go ahead and I'll go after you.
No, Kayla, you go ahead. It's fine.
Thanks. On the site plan, can you identify where each of those buildings are? I just can't see it on the screen right here.
So the number 5 is the burn boxes. That's the building that's currently there. There's 2 containers right behind that are currently there, and there's 2 containers over, I'm trying to see, I think that's like number 9. Yep. Those are the only containers there currently. The larger back here on the second kind of block, yep, perfect. That's going to be the location for the clean building.
Thanks. The only other question that I have is that in the application or in the staff report, it's referenced that these containers will periodically change shape or change form. So Paul, I don't know if you can answer this. These renderings look like somewhat of a permanent structure. And so I just am curious how that will work with that rendering. Will it change the rendering then? Or will the design of the burn box change as the layout of the containers change?
I don't think so, Kayla, and not in this case. And Sean, you want to
Sure.
address that?
The intent is not to move them. Again, I think there was some confusion from previous chatter about the project, in that the idea is to establish each building, if you will, and then be able to change the internal workings of them, or the internal pathways, hallways, rooms, fairly easily. But the idea is that the building will be there until the land is no longer going to function as such. And then we would be able to take it down. It could move to a different location, or it could be scrapped, or, you know, or hopefully it's not in my lifetime. But the idea is that it is something that we want to put up and we want to use as a training facility. Does that answer it, Kayla?
Yeah, that definitely answers my question. And then it also talks about in the staff report that there's not a need for a building permit. Is that correct, Paul? These won't require a building permit, or they may be subject to a building permit?
I'm reserving that for each construction. I think
Okay.
these two bigger buildings, I certainly will require a building permit for. It's likely that maybe not so much the others.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to check. Thanks.
Muted it. If I could just add real quick, Paul or whoever the building official is moving forward, we would always welcome them out to see what's going on. I mean, that's again, that's in our mind part of being part of the community and a good neighbor. We love to share what we're doing. So I love the fact that Paul reserves that right. Thank you.
I was curious about the frequency of training events. If you have any ideas, I know it said, you know, staffing could increase as well. So yeah, just curious how often it's going to be used, and if there's any seasonality to it too.
There is some seasonality. So currently, Fire Academy at the Timberline campus starts in August and ends in December, or late November. So we anticipate there being more use during that time, with CMC using the building. And again, with my joint position, we're excited to offer that up here locally. The department, if you can draw that line, using it, it could potentially be daily, but we cannot fund, like as an example, lighting fires in it daily. So while there may be people there training, it won't be with live fire. We anticipate once a month using it for live fire training. Now, law enforcement, again, depending on their interest and moving forward with them as a partner, we don't really know how often they'll want to use it, or financially be able to pay their staff to go train together. We hope that we get good use out of it, but I don't have a solid answer for that. What I can say is that at least initially, we don't anticipate there being much noticeable noise, much noticeable negative interaction. Does that make sense? Like I'm thinking of how to say that, and it's between the berm and us being inside of those containers. I imagine it's going to be pretty quiet out there.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions as well. It just might be one long sentence. You mentioned tear gas, pepper spray, smoke, sound, driving, shots. Oh, that's a lot of sound. It's a lot of, I'm very sensitive to smoke and air quality. How do you guys help manage that with the surrounding areas? Do you notify on days that you're using those products? Is there anything to that we should take into account?
I can speak to the smoke. And again, I can't imagine I'll speak to the smoke first. The fires that we're talking about lighting, because we are lighting them in a container and within a room that we've framed out and drywalled within that container, we're talking about 2 pallets, 3 pallets being burned at a time. There will be minimum smoke with that. The typical wind pattern out there is from the west, and there's good lift. And what I mean when I say that is, whenever we've had any small fire out there, we've seen it lift and dissipate and become unnoticeable almost immediately. That said, there will be a little bit, but again, realistically, we're looking at, with the exception of maybe Fire Academy, once a month being able to actually light a fire and get the department together to train. Otherwise, it'll be non-fire training. The amount of tear gas, and again, I don't even know if they use tear gas anymore, but pepper spray, less lethal rounds, things like that. I would think that most of that would be contained within those boxes. I can't imagine them using enough to affect anybody off of the property. But again, I think it's a fair question.
And then with the smoke, do you guys post notice that, smoke is going to be visible? How, especially in the summer, I know is that going to overflow like dispatch calls? Is there a process and a procedure for that?
There is not. It's certainly not off the table if that was necessary. Again, in the interest of being a good partner, we would want to figure out how to get that posted up on the CDOT signs, or if we had to get live burn in progress, please don't report smoke for certain areas. But I don't know as we're going to have enough for it to be reportable. Okay. But we would certainly humor anybody's concern, at that point. And it's something that we're going to monitor, because again, we understand the importance of being there and being a good neighbor.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions before I'll turn it over to Anne for public comment? Okay, Anne, if you've got anybody there that has any public comment they'd like to make.
Absolutely. And I would just ask if you are either Pete or telephone number 720-937-7546. If you wouldn't mind sending me your full name in the chat. It's simply for the record. We keep record of anyone that attends public hearings. So if you don't mind sending me your first and last name in the chat, I would greatly appreciate it. And Heather, we have a comment coming from Haley Ham.
Okay, Haley, go ahead.
Hey there, everyone. Apologies that I placed my comment in the chat prior to you guys asking for it. But if we haven't met, I'm the director for the Office of Emergency Management, and just wanted to kind of clarify my comment there. Our region, we're part of the central region, so that includes El Paso, Colorado Springs, Teller, Park, and Chaffee counties. So I just wanted to throw out there, we constantly talk about training as a region. We have regional assets, some of which Leadville Fire has. We have something called a mobile command. There's a lot of tactical equipment that is regionally based and that can be deployed and trained with elsewhere. So just want to throw it out there that I've been updating our region and saying that this training center is in the works, and it's a really positive thing, and that we want our region to get up here and train with us, especially on those shared resources. It's no surprise Leadville doesn't get a crazy amount of love, and our region tries, but I think this would be really appealing to those partners. And, I threw out just a few. We have Hazmat, which is the lead for the Hazmat is actually Leo Schmidt, who's at Leadville Fire. We have a tactical group, we have a communications group, and then obviously all local jurisdictions. There's fire departments, police department, sheriff's office, and so on. So just wanted to throw that out there that as Captain Simon talked about, it certainly reaches beyond just local response and training, and that this could hit a lot of folks, and it's really, really exciting. I don't think I have to convince anyone what a big deal training is. So thanks.
Thank you, Kaylee. Next, we have comment from Kelly Sweeney.
There we go. And I can try to put on the video, but I might lose it. So maybe I'll go with that. We'll try. I thank you all for this opportunity to address this really amazing facility that could come to our county. I want to do a little disclaimer. One is I'm the president of the Friends of Twin Lakes and a beneficiary of training from Lake County Fire Department, and was able to use that training only because it immediately followed having been trained on using a fire extinguisher on the 7th of July, 2017, when we had a little fire start right outside the village, and I was able to jump to it on that. Also, being a resident of living above Twin Lakes Village and knowing how everyone was impacted by the controlled burn that got out of control in 2017 with the forest fire. And now we have a very ugly burn scar that I would welcome seeing those containers on the Forest Service land instead of that burn scar. It's important that people have this training. And as far as involvement with Office of Emergency Management, other agencies, and in particularly the sheriff, I think having them trained so that they are dancing together, it is an important ballet response. We had incidences during some of the events in 2019 where there was not a clear-cut chain of response. And as a result, we had the sheriff's office and other responders all showing up for one crash, if you will, on a race, and then not having the right people there to respond or being available to direct traffic and do some of the other necessary things. So this is just a tremendous, tremendous opportunity for our county, for the city of Leadville, and for also our folks that participate from outside the area. And a final point is having a facility like this to train in is going to offer our Leadville Lake County Fire Department a more attractive feature for any resident potential firemen or trainees. And I think that's something that needs to be looked at too. So I appreciated all the comments that other people made. I don't mean to be repetitive, but thank you for this opportunity to speak. And I am just so hopeful for what this will mean for the benefit of our county visitors and community as a whole. So thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Next, we would like to take public comment from Melissa Kerr.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. I'm Melissa Keir. I'm a resident out on County Road 11. I have some questions that I'd just like to ask for things that I am not familiar with. So will the berms that you started making about a year and a half ago be revegetated? So Sean, if you could answer that, or if you can, if I'm allowed to hear that answer, that's one question. And then also from Kaylee's comment, I'm a little concerned about the idea of partnering with hazmat training. So I'd like to know how that works with hazardous chemicals as well. That's a little bit of a concern to me if, if that's a type of partner. And then also another question, I have two other questions. Aaron, thank you for your comment about kind of the sound. I don't think Sean fully answered whether or not the residents in the area would be, if we would be shared with when there's gunfire happening and, you know, loud sounds happening in our backyard. So if we could hear, if we would be notified of any of those activities, that would be wonderful to hear whether or not we would. And then also with Aaron's comment, it made me think of the wildlife that are out here. So you may be familiar that we have a really large herd of elk, you know, 100 head, sometimes maybe even more, that actually hang out right back by that facility that's being built. So just wondering, kind of, have you done any impacts for the wildlife in that area, especially around, you know, their movement or those sounds? There's also the pronghorn that hang out back there a lot, especially in the spring and the fall. And there's only, I think, 9 pronghorn in that herd. And they definitely love your space out there. So just wanting to know if there's if you have looked into anything with the wildlife as well in the area. I do have one other question, but it might be good to kind of hear some information about that before I ask.
Thank you, Melissa, for your comment. Heather, would you like to hear from the applicant in response to those 4 questions?
Sure, we can kind of go about it in that order. Typically what we'll do is have you ask all your questions, and then that way he can kind of take note and answer them. But I don't think we have a giant, we don't have a ton of people on here tonight, so I think we can probably allocate it that way. So if you'd like to go ahead, Sean, and kind of address those initial questions while they're front of mind, that might be helpful.
I also only have one other one, Sean. Heather, if you want me to ask that one, and then that's all my questions, and I just have another comment after that. The other question is, I was looking at the document and I see the area where the rail cars are now. And what I'm seeing below was another space, which is across the road. I couldn't quite tell from the rendering what it was. And so it looked like some trees, but then it looked like maybe even a pond of some sort and maybe a structure. I was wondering, Sean, if you could share with me kind of what I'm seeing, what I saw on that document for the space that's east of the location where the rail cars are right now. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Melissa. Sean, I've gone ahead and put these in order. So first, if you would like to talk to the berms and any potential revegetation plans.
Yeah, the plan, once we're done excavating material out, the plan is to revegetate them as natural as we can. Some of that we believe will happen just, again, naturally. But we recognize that we're going to have to kind of help some of that along, and we plan to do so. Still needing to excavate for the clean building, we're going to have more material. We don't necessarily want to, revegetate it just to then change it and bury it. And, you know, that just doesn't really make sense. So absolutely, we plan to revegetate it and again, try to soften the look of the shipping containers.
Very good. The second question that Melissa had was concerning Kaylee's discussion of the potential of collaboration for hazmat training on site. And if you could elaborate on or to define that a little better.
Absolutely. The hazmat training is just that. There's never in training specifically for hazmat any hazardous materials. It is strictly going through the process as if we were working with hazardous materials, but we would not have any hazardous materials stored or used, whether training or otherwise there. So hopefully that answers that.
Very good. The next question was sound mitigation or potential of being notified when sound was going to be present within, or sound impacts could be present within a training.
Sure. You know, I'll say this again. Our idea is if we get into this and something isn't working, we would want to hear from the person it's not working for, and our goal, our idea would be to work with them to fix it. I can't always say, you know, that it would be whatever they want, they get. But I can say that we do take interest and value in our community members, and we would absolutely work towards minimizing whatever that was, and or notifications. I mean, I see no problem with that. I don't know how far, is it that we have a list of email that gets updated, that we send out an email blast that we're going to be training on these dates? It could be a published calendar. I'm just making stuff up here, but we would absolutely not have a problem notifying those that want to be notified. But the idea really is to not have it be noise to the degree that is disturbing to our neighbors. I think about like the shooting range that's currently out there. Are they notifying anybody? And I don't anticipate a lot of shooting, in the facility proper. I would imagine they're still going to be going over and using the shooting range as it's been used previously. There might be some less lethal shots fired inside of the building, but again, that's going to be contained within the building. So I don't anticipate a lot of noise, but if noise became a problem, we'd certainly want to work with our neighbors to make sure that we were minimizing that.
Thank you, Sean. The next question was, has there been any consideration for wildlife impact regarding the elk and pronghorn and other wildlife in the area?
There has, and I'll say that unofficially. I'm well aware of the large elk population in the pronghorn. The idea of us building it, developing the 10 acres out of the 50-acre piece was just that. We want to minimize not only the visual impact, but we want to keep it kind of in one location, which in my mind allows the pronghorn and the elk and any other animals that use that corridor to be able to move freely without fear of us. And I think the berms are going to kind of help that as well.
And lastly, Melissa had a question about if you could kind of define or illustrate the site itself and where the structures will be located.
Sure. Are you able to pull up Exhibit H? I think that might help me a little bit.
I think Heather's going to pull it up for us.
Yep, let me work on that here.
Okay.
Thank you, Heather. Can you scroll that down just a little bit? Just so we're kind of looking at the 11A. Yep. So the low point there, if you can see, that's number 22. It's kind of looks like a, I don't know, like a, yeah, yep. That's the low point on the property. So if we are required to have a collection point, that's where any water would collect naturally. And that's where we would direct it from any point to that point of the property, because that's the natural low point. Those other little circles around that are the trees that are currently there. We want to keep those. We love the idea of having a few trees out there. And then we move over into kind of the next block, if that makes sense. The largest, no?
No, you're good. Thank you. I just wanted to see a little bit more about that lower pond area where the water would settle. And I know there's a ditch that runs through there under the road. That's it. I understood everything else that you said earlier about the other one. So thank you. I guess I could finish in. I just had one more comment real quick. Just to share that, I'm all for collaboration. That's what I do on a daily basis in my own personal job. And I think having a facility like this is certainly beneficial for our community and for our first responders. So I'm all for that. And I'm not, you know, a not in my backyard type person. I'm not a NIMBY, but I will say that, you know, it has been frustrating to myself, and I'll speak for some of my other neighbors, that, you know, I would say being a good neighbor would have, it would have been helpful for us to have been notified about this a year and a half ago, instead of, you know, finding out through word of mouth or contacting our county commissioners. And so whether that's not, you know, Sean and his department's fault, or if that's a, you know, more of a building plan, but being a good neighbor would have been being more transparent and sharing with the residents out here the plan for this area before it actually started happening, because that definitely was a little concerning to us. So that's all. But yeah, collaboration, beneficial, wonderful. I'm glad to know that the rail cars will be painted soon. That's about all. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. And I don't believe we have any further community members wanting to make comment this evening, except that Cheryl Wells would like to just offer support for the application. And I think that's all that, actually we have one last question from Kayla.
Thanks, Dan. Paul, is there any kind of requirement or condition regarding landscaping on the northern or eastern side of the site?
There are minimum standards and the design guidelines that, yes, in effect, I think that we can probably tell them what is needed. I think the main thing that's going to be needed on those berms is erosion control.
Okay. I was just curious about any kind of, you know, like adding any kind of trees or shrubbery to those berms to assist with maybe some of the noise control and the aesthetics of the site itself.
Yeah, I think that the applicant would be willing to hear that. But I think one of the things that we need to concern ourselves with that kind of thing is the ability to water those facilities or that landscaping. So that's something that I think that it sounds to me like the fire department would be more than willing to do more of.
Okay, I have not received any other request for any community comment.
I do have a letter I'd like to read into the record.
Go for it.
This is from C.R. Veneman. I own Elk Run Lot 2, and though it looks as though my property is not immediately adjacent to the proposed facility structures, it would be visible from my northern border. I have read the design characteristics, but of course, isolation and quiet were the reasons for my purchasing an Elk Run to begin with, and do not wish there to be any impact on these criteria. I'm sure all ground impact studies were performed per code as listed, and the water table will not be affected by chemicals or sewage, but I may have missed any impact on wildlife. There, of course, is a herd of elk that frequent the close eastern lands and Elk Run in general, and there are also numerous pronghorn that often inhabit the areas that are being considered. Of course, always property value is a concern, and anything that distracts from it, from the ambiance of the area, would be regrettable and not favorable in my mind. It would be a plus, though, for an increase in jobs and financial tax base for Leadville. And as a side thought, this project may not help, but anything that would attract more specialty workers to the area, like plumbers and electricians, rather than hiring from Summit County, would be helpful. Sincerely, C.R. Veneman.
Thank you, Paul. And so we don't have any more public comment. I have a quick question. I know that Paul in the staff report kind of talked about where the funding is coming from. Has the funding actually been secured for this?
So beginning in 2017, the fire department has allotted some money towards it. And that's in part why it's crawled along. Last year, we received a post grant in collaboration with the Leadville Police Department of round numbers, I'll say 70, a little over $70,000. I don't remember the exact amount. That actually closes out, I believe, June 15th. I have to spend the rest of the money. That's how we were able to get those containers that are out there now purchased, as well as the footers for those containers put in place. Otherwise, we've been doing kind of in-kind work and having in-kind work from Leadville Street Department and Public Works with this project so far. So to directly answer your question, that's a little bit of the history. To directly answer your question, we don't have any more funding secured. So this could take 5 years. It could take 5 months. We're going to look for creative ways to fund this project.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from public, planning commission, county commissioners before we move to close the public hearing?
This is Commissioner Mudge. I just had a question for clarification on that re-veg question on the backside of those berms. I think Sean addressed it, but I'm not sure I heard the complete answer. I think it was said that those might move, but if not, I wonder if there's a opportunity to consider revegetating the backsides of those.
They're not necessarily going to move, but they may change shape a little as more materials excavated for the next building. That's what I was trying to express, and so that's why we have.
Okay, they're not a final. It's not. Those will move per the plan, but they're not. They're not going to continue to shift.
They shouldn't continue to shift. They may get more round, less abrupt as materials added to them. And then we plan on putting another berm on the south side, as well as the east side, again, to try to minimize the visual impact. And our thoughts, because of the vegetation out there being sage and kind of that high desert tundra, if you will, is to continue to revegetate with that type of, so that I think it doesn't make sense to try to use something that takes a lot of water as an example out there. But we do appreciate that it does need to get done.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions or anything? And if hearing none, we need a motion to close the public hearing.
I move to close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
I
Any opposed? Okay. At this time, public hearing is closed, which means we can't entertain any further public comment or questions, either from the applicant or public at this time. this is going to be the time of, now, Anne, for clarification, the commissioners are dropping off. Do they come back on for the next one, or do we need to table this and do the next one first?
I would suggest tabling the motion to go ahead and address the next file, and then that way the commissioners can just stay concurrently with the discussion and the hearing.
Okay. So we'll table the motion on this particular CUP application and listen to the next public hearing application so that we can keep that the commissioners in for that. Let me just stop the share. So the next one is file 21-02, which is the Floyd right-of-way vacation request. And Anne, I'll give that. Do we need to reopen public hearing?
No, I think I can go ahead and do the staff report presentation here from the representative on the file, and then we can move into reopening, I think, the public hearing. Have you closed? You've already closed public hearing. So
the other one, yep. So
yeah, we could just go through this and then reopen it when we're ready for that comment.
Great.
Thank you. This is file 2102, the Floyd vacation request. The applicant is Mary Christina Floyd, who is retained as the county attorney. However, Ms. Floyd has processed the application directly with staff and has not had contact with either the board or the planning commission. And this evening, the representative for the file, Katie Welter, will be present to discuss the nature of the application with us. The application is requesting a vacation of the right-of-way located adjacent to the property she owns, located at 282 Tabor Drive. I was going to share, let me see if I can screen share here real quick. And so I can everyone see that okay? So the area that we're talking about is right here in my cursor. This lot is Ms. Floyd's property, and this little bump out here, just that half of that circle is the area that we are speaking about this evening. The right-of-way was originally platted by the Turquoise Lake Plat, which was recorded in 1965. At the time the Turquoise Lake Estates was established and created, this area was used for snow storage and road maintenance. In 2007, this area then expanded to the west and became known as Elk Trail. And this road then expanded into that subsequent subdivision. It's important to note that pursuant to section 3.20.5.1, vacation of roads, streets, highways, and easements, the procedures for vacating a right-of-way is fully regulated to Colorado Revised Statutes, Part 3, Article 2, Title 43. This gives us the basis of defining how we best title and we identify the right party eligible for that title and the method of vacation. I think it's noteworthy that a vacation does not have to go through a public hearing process. However, after discussing this with legal counsel on another vacation that we did in the past, they fully support us vetting it through this public hearing process so that the Board of County Commissioners make the most informed decision. And we ask the Planning Commission, given their expertise, to come on and help just fully vet the request of the applicant. This area is one of the most important things to note is why this area was originally designed and whether or not that purpose is present today. So the application was immediately vetted with the Public Works Director, Michael Irwin, to identify if this purpose was and what it was designed for was still readily used. And after speaking with Michael, we have every confidence that with the expansion of this roadway and the subsequent turnarounds and areas within the new subdivision, adequate snow storage can be maintained in other areas, as well as proper road maintenance can be. There would not be a lapse in being able to properly maintain the roadways if this area went into private ownership. Additionally, and I'm sure Katie will speak to this a bit, the applicant has shared that there have been some adverse outcomes based on the use of this area in the past snow storage, which caused drainage issues that negatively affected the applicant's residents on the lot, as well as this, as you can see by the nature of where it's located and the shape of it, people would come into the subdivision and realize that there was no outlet and use it as a turnaround. And so in the spring, the applicant has indicated that big ruts would be driven into that area when it was used as a turnaround. So the applicant is suggesting that the vacation will provide a method to eliminate a right-of-way that no longer needs to fulfill the purpose that it was designed for, mitigate an adverse drainage condition affecting the applicant's residence, remove the opportunity for future damage with the turnaround, and allow the owner the ability to realize the full potential of the property. We have duly noticed the file. It has been posted and mailed. I only received one inquiry that I provided the link to the website. They just had some minor questions, and then so they supported the application. They are an adjacent property owner, or actually they're a representative of an adjacent property owner. And there aren't findings directly given by the code. So staff has suggested 2 findings that could be made for a basis of considering vacating this property and transferring it into private ownership to Ms. Floyd. And one is that the granting of the vacation will not have a negative effect on the neighboring landowners or tenants, the public health, safety, or welfare of county residents. And number 2, that the purpose of the right-of-way is no longer needed by Lake County to ensure proper road maintenance in the area. And if anyone has any questions, I would love to answer them, entertain those. Otherwise, I will introduce Katie Welter and let her fill in any information that she thinks that I might have forgotten to share.
Go ahead, Katie, if you want to go ahead and make any kind of additional notes, comments.
You know, I think, Anne, you captured everything really well. Thank you. I think Chris was not able to be here tonight, but she did ask me to just be present on her behalf in order to respond to any questions or concerns. You know, I think Anne captured it, which is that the original purpose for the right-of-way is no longer needed since the road has been extended to the new subdivision, and its presence is only harmful to Chris and her property. So we would respectfully request that you approve it, the vacation of the right-of-way.
Thank you, Katie. At this time, we'll open up public hearing again. I think we all remember what my big spiel I did before, so we can just go ahead and open public hearing at this time. Does anybody, again, if we can either raise hands with the reactions or send a note to Anne if you have any public comment or questions for Anne or the applicant at this point. Okay. Well, hearing none, we can entertain a motion to close public hearing on this file as well.
I move to close public hearing on file 2102.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, at this point, the public hearing is now closed. County commissioners can leave and go about their evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, we can, do we want to just, this application's open here right now? Do we want to finish this or go back to the fire station? I feel like these are both going to be fairly quick. But
Let's just finish this one.
okay, I agree. Does anybody have any comments or talking points on this vacation?
Actually, I do. I live at Turquoise Lake Estates and been very familiar with all the lots out here. Been here a long time. And they're right that really is not needed anymore. And there was a big time when it was, but once they put in the other subdivision, they plow right on through. So I'm for this application.
In that, obviously we wouldn't do it in this case, and I'll probably be disliked for this comment, but if the county owns that road, is this something that in the future the county could potentially get like a small amount of money for vacating it and giving that land value to the homeowner? Just in that the county doesn't necessarily have slews of cash or ways to sell off property. So just something that entered my brain.
We do have an acquisition process by which someone could apply, but in this way, since this was a dedicated right-of-way, it does have to go through a vacation process. The statute doesn't really talk about any kind of consideration given for a right-of-way, so I'm really unsure if monetary consideration can be part of a vacation.
Okay, it was just something I happen to know that BLM is really awesome at that in town. If you have an accidental sliver of BLM land underneath your property and you want it back, you get to pay value for that land. So anyway, it just made me think of that as far as the county's budget goes. But does anybody else have any comments or questions?
I might indicate that value for vacated land is not something that gets considered in the vacation process. I might also indicate that the value of this particular portion of this turnaround that's being vacated really is so small it doesn't really have that much in the way of value.
All right, if there are no more comments or questions, we can entertain a motion. In doing so, one would want to read one of the recommended motions that staff has provided and or amend it how they would like to make the motion.
Can you put the staff recommendations on the screen?
Let's see.
Are you ready for the motion?
I'm ready when you are.
And I move the Planning Commission recommend approval to the Lake County Board of County Commissioners to vacate the right-of-way legally described by Marsden Engineering and evidenced by the attached Exhibit B. And further finding, 1, the granting of a vacation will not have a negative effect on neighboring landowners or tenants, public health, safety, or welfare of county residents. Then 2, the purpose of the right-of-way is no longer needed by Lake County to ensure proper road maintenance in the area.
I second.
Great. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay. Hearing none, I will do a roll call of approval. Howard Schutz,
Aye.
Abby Dahlman,
Aye.
Bryce Ehrlich,
Aye.
Aaron Palin,
Aye.
and Heather Lind, aye. Okay, file 21-02 moves forward with that recommendation to the county commissioners. Now we will go back and visit discussion on file 21-01, which is the training facility CUP. Anybody have any comments or questions, or I guess no more questions, but comments to discuss on that application?
Was a wildlife study actually done? Impact study? Do we know?
No, it didn't sound like an official one had been done.
Okay.
And I will say that this application was referred to the Division of Parks and Wildlife, and we got no response.
One note that I have, and I think it refers a little bit to like the berm vegetation and things like that, is at no fault to this applicant, but there have been other applicants that I was actually just talking to Ann about this a little bit earlier today, but I have a pretty big concern with starting a project and not finishing it. There are several of those now sitting around town on scenic places. There was a storage unit facility that's supposed to go up on 24 that hasn't gone into place. I'm guessing due to funding. Where the South Fire Station was going to go, you know, that's on hold. There are just some things like that that I'm a little bit worried about, or I have some concern, and I guess I would like to see something built into a condition, if possible, that it's tough, because what we're doing is we're approving an entire plan, but if only pieces and parts of the plan start getting put into place, you're still approving the use of that land to work in that manner. The fact that there are the containers already being put out there, you know, that's like a really good example of that, in that because funding isn't totally secure, and this is probably one of those chicken and egg things where you can't necessarily get the funding unless you know you can do it. And it can take some time. I just get concerned with half-built projects and or something like this, where the cheap thing is going to be to put out the containers before building the actual structures that are going to look nice. And what kind of timeline is there to make sure that the containers are painted appropriately, or that the berm is vegetated? And it just seems like all of those things are going to happen once there's funding. But in the meantime, some of the more affordable things could happen. Overall, like the whole concept of the plan, and if there were funding and they were able to build this and do the whole thing tomorrow, I have zero concerns about it. I just have concerns with it being pieced over time, and how can we mitigate some of the impacts that could have on the neighbors and on the visual aesthetics and things like that. So that's one concern that I have, just because we've gotten we've gotten the fingers shaken at us a few times for some of the more recent ones where projects have fallen apart that we've approved. So just something that I wanted to put out there. I think the rest of it, I think that if there were complaints or there were issues that came up regarding sounds or visual aesthetics, I truly do believe that the applicant would work diligently to mitigate those issues. So I don't have as much concern over the other items brought up. So that's me, my 2 cents.
Can we put an expiration date?
Well, a conditional use permit runs with it until it gets revoked from you. But I think we could have a condition in there that the use doesn't happen until a certain time. But I guess maybe now that I'm saying that out loud, maybe that's something maybe we should have referred to the applicant to see if there's pieces that, you know, as far as what the phasing plan could look like as far as use, because it's just tough to, like he said, it could be that they get funding in 2 months and it could be that they get funding in 5 years. So you just don't necessarily know. So it's pretty hard for them to create that phasing plan as far as use. It's just a hard thing to control, I think, in a way.
Heather, obviously I don't want to speak out of turn, but I can speak to a small portion of funding.
I'm going to pause you just for a second and just double check. Staff, did we figure out that we are allowed to have applicants speak and during this closed public hearing part?
If you say so, if you give permission.
Okay, I give permission.
So the post grant that we received last year that closes out on June 15th, we still have $15,000 to spend. That money is earmarked for the paint and the porch and basically the visual impact minimization plan to be completed. Now, I understand your concern with the berm. And like I say, all I can do is work towards that being completed as we have more material from excavating for the future buildings. In addition to funding sources, I don't know if it's known, but Leadville Fire deploys nationally on wildland incidents, and a portion of that money is earmarked towards training. Previously, we've used that money to get to where we were. Then we were able to secure that post grant, which has gotten us to where we are. And I hope that maybe relieves some of that concern. As I said previously, the porch is both functional and aesthetic. And so that is priority to get put on there. We have trusses already to do the kind of parapet portion. If you're looking at exhibit I, it's kind of got that peaked roof right up front on the 11A side. So that's, again, we have the lumber, and the lumber we have the $15,000 to purchase the lumber to get it looking better out there.
Okay, so I'm trying to pull up that. So exhibit I, which is the burn building, you're saying that you have the trusses for that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where you see that peak on the front,
Yep.
we actually have the 4 trusses that we'll use for that.
But you'll still need the building materials for all of the rest of it.
Yes.
Okay.
Which is where we plan to use the remaining $15,000 from that grant.
Oh, okay. And so the 15,000 would pay for that building to be built?
It would pay for the porch and that parapet and the paint. The rest of the interior work won't necessarily matter to the public when that happens. But again, that's framing and OSB and drywall, which we have a small cache of that already. And then as we deploy on wildland, we'd be able to move funds towards the purchase of that material.
And that's because all of the rest of the structure is these shipping containers?
Correct.
Okay.
And then in addition to that, we have Colorado Mountain College. They are going to be purchasing a lot of the materials for their Fire One Academy for us to be able to finish the interior of these props.
Okay.
But again, that shouldn't necessarily matter to anybody looking from the outside, to the container.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Oops.
I wonder if there could be a condition then just around the berm. revegetation, just knowing too that the vegetation out there is just hard to get growing. So I feel like it will and should take some additional effort.
Yeah, and it's funny because I have this little tiny berm at my house that I've been trying forever to turn into a flower berm, and it's just never ever worked. And I've got to like get a load of compost or something because the dirt's just not going to work. So I can only imagine how difficult it's going to be out there to do that. So I have some sympathy in that piece, but also giant dirt piles aren't reasonable either. And and to that note, like at the truckloads of compost to help vegetate those berms might not be, I don't know what we, my initial thought on the structures is, putting a condition in that says something to the effect of like, any building permits or structures that are being built or building materials being delivered to the site are going to be completed within 1 year or something like that, so that we don't end up having a storage of building materials sitting out there. That helps mitigate, some of the issues we've seen on some of the other projects that we've had in the past. And then maybe alongside that, it's within so long of the building's being done, or as the building is being done, there's some extra percentage of berm that's, I don't know. Those are just thoughts that I am having as far as berm vegetation.
Would it make sense to potentially have a condition that says basically, if your resources are going to the burn boxes building, then, in order for the conditional use permit to go into effect, that building has to be completed before other buildings are, like, if the worry is that we're going to have too many supplies and use without the visual impact plan actually taking effect, or the berm being replaced, can we limit it to, you get to use your building when it's definitively brought up to what you say your final plan is per that building, and you can go through the site. Now that probably doesn't help with training, but I don't know if that's like an easier way to kind of try to break this down.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely an option. What are other planning commissioners thoughts?
Heather, there's always a possibility that it gets started and never gets finished. And I think we got to look at that possibility. Maybe a conditional use permit for a certain time period. And after that time period, if they haven't had a building, then they start vegetating, taking care of the berms.
It's tough because the purpose is there, but the reality too is you don't want a lot, even with the best intent, funding is funding, for it to just sit there and not come together for that neighborhood.
It is allowable by code for a time constrictions be placed on a conditional use permit.
Then you can always come back and ask for an extension, right? Like, so it's not bad to check in and just kind of ground truth it with what's gonna in reality happen in a few years from now.
Ground truth.
Just make sure that your condition has that check-in point and the ability to have that check-in, because they're keeping in mind there's not an amendment process for a conditional use permit. So make sure your condition, if you do that, it'll need a time frame and the ability to have a check-in point and then a remedy if the check-in point, if things aren't where they need to be. I would put in it the ability or the method by which an extension could be granted, so that we don't end up in a point where we're going to be considering we're amending because we don't have an amendment process. So I think you need a time frame and then a check-in, what needs to be done at that check-in point, and then a remedy based on whatever, criteria that you would want for that extension, so that it's really intentional for future administration of the conditional use permit.
So the only concern I have on that is in the past, that's hindered a lot of people's ability to get financing if they have an expiration date on their permit. And I don't want to hinder the ability to get financing any more than I'm sure the struggle is already. And so I'm just wondering if we just go about that same idea a different way. And instead of expiring the conditional use permit, it really just is that, well, it could be twofold. It could be that, buildings aren't being constructed unless full financing, a building isn't constructed unless that full financing for that building is there. And B, that if the project isn't complete as described in the application within 4 years, or I don't know, whatever time period we want to put on there, then it would come to a potential revocation hearing for the condition. Like then it could expire, but otherwise it doesn't expire as normal CUPs. Does that sound reasonable? Because I hate to give it an expiration date because most CUPs don't have any expiration date unless you don't follow your application and your conditions. And that can really affect any kind of financing possibilities for them if we have, a 2 or 3 year expiration date on the CUP. But if we instead put in a revocation clause that we can revoke it if they aren't through completed building within a certain period, in that revocation hearing, it can be an extension / revocation hearing, but it's less, I feel like it's a little less impactful. What are people's thoughts?
Well, the time limits, should get the determination from Sean and his group of when they expect to have these certain items completed.
I like the idea of the full financing before construction as a condition. And then if you combine that with, no storage of materials out there before construction, I think those two would help eliminate that. Just my general comments on the project is I think, the application demonstrated the need and the benefit of this facility and their commitment to being a good neighbor. And I think kind of given that it's not just going to be one entity, it's going to be multiple entities, national, local, and then you add in the college as well. I don't foresee this being too tied up with financing, but I understand that's always a possibility and something to worry about. So I think the college, partnership alone really helps me not worry about that as much though. But yeah, so I think, the full financing condition, and then I like the other conditions that staff have put on there as well, like especially the dark sky compliance and the water protections in accordance with CDPHE. I mean, only makes sense, but I really like that those are kind of elucidated a little bit more. So yeah, I think maybe a couple more conditions just to make sure that it's not a blank site out there for years.
Well, and it's not even that I care if it's a blank site. It's just that I care if it becomes a blank site with a bunch of shipping containers and building materials sitting out there,
Well, so stuff's been out there for 1.5 years already. How does that? Is that what the neighbors said? No?
That's kind of what the neighbor implied, and I honestly haven't paid attention, so I didn't know.
I think those shipping containers went out a few, I was there a few weeks ago just driving by and seeing, and they were all stacked up and it looked pretty like they had paved and everything. I think it was last summer, there was a newspaper article or something about that. Right, Sean?
Well, I guess that's just kind of a good indicator of we're 1 year, 1.5 years in of stuff being on the site already. So definitely want to keep time. I think I don't want to hinder funding by any means, and I want it to be approved and I want the use given, but I don't think we're going to continue to have that friendly neighborhood support if we're 6 years in and it's still just dirt and shipping containers. And I don't think that's anyone's intent, but I think we have to protect that.
Yeah, and I guess without this conditional use permit, what's the rules for if somebody just has a vacant land and just stores a bunch of shipping containers on it? Is that even allowed right in our code? Okay. So it's kind of been not code compliant up to this point as far as doing that. Okay. So we want to get it to that place where it's used. And I think that that's the big.
Performance bond guarantees are allowed within code for certain conditional use permit applications. I'm not sure that might be overly onerous on this particular application, but might be food for thought and further discussion.
If the planning commission, would humor a couple thoughts of mine.
Humor away.
So we did stack the containers under the understanding that we were working within the code. And we ceased moving forward with anything when we were told that we needed to go through this process. And so that's in part why it has been sitting as it has. In fact, I spoke with Anne and asked her specifically about painting them. Can I just paint them to kind of minimize the impact? And she recommended not to because we didn't know how this hearing would go. And I appreciated her looking out for me and our agency for that, because we don't want to waste time and resources. Should this not go through. To speak a little bit, the overall build out, it is going to depend on funding. Our idea is to get this building not only aesthetically pleasing, but using it by August, which is pretty aggressive, and it won't be the full building being used, but it will be enough of it to be able to run CMC's Fire Academy through it. Any materials stored out there are being stored within the containers themselves. So we are trying to minimize that. As far as the berm goes, I would not be opposed to starting to work on that northern berm, with the understanding that as funding is secured for that second building, which will be somewhat costly because it is going to be a full building, that the material that's excavated, I'll say that again, the material excavated from where that building will be is going to be used on the southern berm and the eastern berm. So as difficult as it is to grow things out there, we don't want to start to get some life growing back into the berms just to dig up the berm or bury the berm into a bigger berm. Or does that kind of make sense? But understanding that if we want to start with the north, I think that makes a lot of sense.
I might suggest that you plan on making portions of the berm as big as you're going to make them, rather than grow them over time. So it may be section by section that you do that, so
Sure.
that you can get it revegetated in a timely manner.
I think that's absolutely reasonable, and it makes a lot of sense, Paul. Thank you.
I wonder if also we couldn't request. I think your application says that your goal is to complete all of this in 5 years.
I don't think I was that aggressive. I think that again, that larger building is going to take significant funds, and that's what we're going to be working on. Is how do we get that? Because it is important for us to be able to store our fire apparatus out there. And that's where we're going to be working with CMC to try to figure out what that funding might look like, in addition to the other agencies, the other local emergency response agencies.
Might I suggest then,
So,
Heather, if
Yep.
that we ask for an annual report from the applicant describing the status, the percentage, the status of the funding until such time as the facility is complete.
so and I'm sorry that I kind of created this giant thing that we're talking about here, but I think that, like I said a few minutes ago, my main concern is just having a bunch of building materials and shipping containers or something like that sitting out there. If they don't build the second building for 10 years, I don't necessarily care. I just don't want it half built sitting out there. So I don't care necessarily that the whole project, personally I'm talking, I don't care if the whole project isn't finished within a couple of years. I think I like Bryce's thought of the financing condition, and or saying something to the effect of like, no new building is constructed without having the full materials and building financing there or available, just so that there is no half-built structures, or there's no shipping containers being, just set out there that haven't been painted, and we don't have the funding for the paint, but we hope to have the funding for the, you know what I mean? Like, I just am wondering is if instead we create the motion, like, I don't know that they have time or we have time to do a yearly check-in to see what their finances are. And as long as they're not creating a giant eyesore and problem for their neighbors out there, then I don't, however long it takes them is my thought on that. But if we have that each building or structure can only be constructed when all building materials are either already purchased or funding is available to purchase such building materials and labor to complete structures. That if we have that condition in there, that kind of solves that for me. But what are your guys' thoughts?
I mean, that kind of goes back to my brainstorm of like, can we like make it each unit, like each building, like we can only do, so if they can do 3 at a time, great. If they can only do 1 at a time, then do the 1. I do have a quick question. So the burn box is the building that's going to be there first. Is that correct? Do you guys have the retention pond and everything already? Because I'm assuming water waste is going to happen when that building's in use. Is there a condition that we need to like make sure that all of this, health and water and everything is tied and also complete to these buildings before it's used? I mean, it should be in theory, but because isn't the retention pond taking the wastewater? Was that not? I might have misunderstood that in the report.
That's the way I understood it.
So like, is that dug and built? Like, do you have the funding for that and to complete the building for use for the course?
The retention pond would be, it's not constructed yet. It would be through in-kind work with Public Works or the city street department.
And prior to using it, if the conditional, okay.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think that was addressed in that we will comply with all CDPHE requirements.
Awesome. But is that like a tag on to that, you have to have all labor, materials and funding and like the permits and the septic, and because you'll need well and septic and everything for that bigger building as well. So we don't really want to say you can construct it without it being complete, or do we not mind if it's like a facade?
If I may speak, I personally like and have no issue with the condition that we will have the funding in place for each prop that we do out there. my idea would certainly, once we get to the point where we are constructing the clean building, is yes, that's going to have to be engineered. It's going to have the water, the sewer, whatever we're going to do for electricity, whether there's propane, and all that stuff is going to have to be accounted for. And I can certainly appreciate not wanting partial buildings out there. And so if it takes us 10 years to get to that point, then so be it, as long as the current building that's there is living up to the visual impact minimization plan, along with the berm, and anything else that we're doing. I think that's very reasonable and appreciate that.
Okay, I just typed up an idea of what I think the condition should be for this. And just want to get, just so that we have something that we can wordsmith and change.
I think that addresses what we've been concerning ourselves with.
I mean, do we need to add a line about with the condition that the building that's been started also gets finished by August that he mentioned? Or is that?
So if their building permit, or I guess doesn't that one need a building permit too? Yeah. So the building permit for that already has an expiration date. So that's kind of built in, I think. So I think this just lets them not start it without having everything already in place.
Thank you.
This doesn't address the berm, which we'll need to do separately, but I just thought we'd work at one at a time. Any changes or suggested? Everybody's good with that one? Okay. And then the berm. Paul had a suggestion of maybe just doing, instead of building out the berms, maybe doing the sections of finishing berm and then continuing it as you go. Applicant seemed okay with that idea. I don't know how necessarily to wordsmith that condition, but.
Section of berm has to be completed per building.
Well, do we want to just say like?
I think just first that it must be revegetated.
Right. And maybe it's just as simple as berm to be revegetated, existing berm to be revegetated, and anytime the berm is added onto, it's also revegetated within so many months, or so that it's just simple.
So I guess I'm not as concerned as the berm as other people. I'm looking at the ACA gravel pit, which is pretty much directly adjacent to this site. And they have a berm around their outer perimeter. Berm was not revegetated. And, it has sage and grass growing on it. So, I mean, I just think it's so hard to grow stuff out there. You're not going to have any success with the stuff that's not native. And that's what's going to grow there eventually anyways, is sage and grass, if you leave it long enough.
I just feel like you should help it along a little bit, because it does take so long that I feel like
I do feel like it's a little bit of a general, revegetation is a little bit of a general word that lots of people will interpret or define differently. Because out there, revegetation really is very, very minimal as far as it is there are lots of sections out there where there's nothing growing. So, I definitely lean towards the same as Bryce, where I'm not as worried about the berm. Which is why I would probably opt to keep it a little looser, in that, they're going to work on trying to keep it revegetated as much as possible for the area. But I don't know about definitives necessarily in there.
Well, and for what it's worth, we can bring water. We can, we can water the berm whenever we're out there.
I think that's more than what the maybe the gravel pit's doing. I mean, if it could just like they will revegetate the berm. I think at the it's something, it shows positive intent and that yeah, I think it's good.
The application did such a good job of trying to tie into the comprehensive plan that I feel like this kind of just piggybacks off of that.
I have to thank Anne for that. She was extremely informative in helping me understand what I needed to do here. So thank you, Anne.
I mean, what if it's something as simple as applicant shall work towards revegetation of berms each year? Is that enough?
Try what I just suggested in the comments, the chat.
Yeah, I just don't, I mean, I just feel like that leaves it open to who's deciding whether it's been unrevegetated.
Or berms shall be shall be vegetated within 1 year of its creation.
I kind of like the, just yearly action, like whatever that action may be towards revegetating each year, something.
Try writing that up.
Okay, how about that?
She did it for me.
Perfect.
Okay. Any other things that we want to discuss or additional conditions?
I think that we got enough comment from the neighborhood that some form of a system of notification of the neighborhood of potentially impactful training events, such as generation of smoke, maybe some generation of noise.
Now, is that something we need to work into the code, or can that be something that they do on their Facebook page and good standing with the community?
I don't know. Maybe
I guess my thought is that that's going to kind of self-regulate if they get these conditional use permits are revocable. So if they are creating excessive noise or smoke or issue, and the neighbors are going to complain about it, and if they continue to not do anything about it, then they'll have to come back to us for revocation. So I don't know if I want to get into like decibels and smoke and all that stuff. So I feel like if we're pretty clear here in this hearing that, you've got to be a good neighbor, then I hope you be a good neighbor so that they don't come to us for a revocation hearing after you've built beautiful buildings.
The only other one was wildlife, and I don't know if there's I don't know that without a formal plan, it's kind of hard to put specific parameters, but I mean it'd be an unfortunate scenario if the herd was present and then there was a large training event that spooked the herd. So
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of tiptoeing around that one. Like, there's still enough land for them, but they're not going to come if they're sound and present.
Typically, state statute requires that a required referral agency must respond within 21 days, or the county gets to decide that without a response, that it is an indication of an approval. Now, the Division of Wildlife is not a statutory referral agency, and particularly for CUPs. But we do extend that requirement to beyond those agencies that are required by statute. And I might say that if the Division of Wildlife or Division of Parks and Wildlife haven't responded to the referral, then perhaps they think it's okay.
Yeah, and I don't know how to make that decision or how to mitigate it.
Well,
I feel like
I
it's
don't
being
think
mitigated by being only 5 acres in a pretty wide open area. You know, there's always going to be wildlife impacts, but I think all things considered, this is going to be minimal in my view. Just because everything will be contained, you know, to that 5 acres, it's not really going to spill over. And I just think I look at the map and I see it right next to a gravel pit, and I think, is this more impactful than the gravel pit? Is this going to add like significant impact on top of that? And I just don't see that.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah, I
agree. Without that being a good point.
I would like to know what all of you think about the proposed condition number 3.
I don't really see a necessity for us to know that necessarily. I think that as long as the applicant is complying with the details of his application, of which he has to do based on the CUP, then I guess I don't necessarily know that whether it's law enforcement or fire or whoever out there, as long as they're complying with the terms of their conditional use permit, I don't know that that one's necessary.
I agree. I kind of wonder why it was there.
I explained that in the staff report.
Yes, you did.
So that condition number 3 could be replaced by applicant shall work to revegetate berms each year to blend with the area's natural landscape.
Yeah, and we have 2 conditions to add. Is there any more discussion before we find somebody who wants to make this motion? All right, who wants to make it?
Heather, can you remind me what the 2 conditions were going to be besides the revegetation of the berms?
The other
Yeah.
was the structures can't be built without funding for each,
Okay.
which is also in the chat. So whoever wants to read the recommended motion right here can do that without number 3 and then just add the other 2 from the chat if they so are inclined.
I'll go for it. You just need to make it a little bigger.
Let's see. I have such a hard
That plus
time.
sign right there, like
In
right
the
below.
middle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like here?
By the hand in the middle.
Oh yeah, there you
No, plus next to it.
go. Is that good?
more. One more. My eyes are bad. Okay. Yeah, are we good? Do we?
Let's do it.
Okay. I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of file 21-01 Headwaters Training Center conditional use permit to the Board of County Commissioners with the following conditions. Comply to the fullest extent the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment's recommendation concerning hazardous materials and waste management and water quality control. 2, exterior lighting shall be dark sky compliant. As consequence, the flag shall not be illuminated. 3, the Lake County building official reserves the right to make the determinations of the necessity of building permits with each individual structure or improvement. 4, all statements made by the applicant in hearing or in the application shall be considered as conditions of approval unless otherwise amended by other conditions of approval. 4, no construction for any building or structure shall commence prior to the applicant obtaining full funding for completion of such structure or building. As such, no materials shall be stored on site for such construction unless adequately sheltered from view to comply with visual impact plan. And 5, applicant shall work to revegetate berms each year to blend in with the area's natural landscape.
Awesome. Do I have a second?
I second.
Yay. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, I'm gonna go through roll call vote. Howard Tritz.
Aye.
Could you read the findings into the motion as well?
Oh, I'm sorry. You do have to do that too.
Okay. All right. And further finding that as conditioned, the proposed conditional use is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies contained in the Lake County Comprehensive Plan. That as conditioned, the proposed conditional use conforms to the requirements and provisions of this code. That as conditioned, adequate public safety, transportation, and utility facilities will be available to serve the subject property while maintaining sufficient levels of service for existing development. That as conditioned, the proposed conditional use is not likely to be detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare of county residents or to cause hardship for neighboring persons. That as conditioned, the proposed conditional use is consistent with and in harmony with neighboring land uses and further intended land uses in the area. That as conditioned, the proposed conditional uses will not result in overly intensive use or the land relative to the surrounding land. That as conditioned, the proposed conditional use will not result in traffic congestion or hazards to vehicular or pedestrian traffic. That as conditioned, the proposed conditional use will not unnecessarily scar the land on which such use would be located. And that as conditioned, the proposed site for conditional use is and will be free from natural or man-made hazards, or that such hazards can and will be adequately mitigated.
Thank you, Abby. All right, again, any discussion on the motion on the table? Okay. Howard Tritz,
Aye.
Bryce Ehrlich,
Aye.
Abby Dahlman,
Aye.
Aaron Palin,
Aye.
Heather Lind, aye. Thank you, everybody.
Good job, Abby.
Yeah, thanks.
You didn't note it, a motion for adjournment?
Yep, we need a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, guys.
I just want to say thank you guys so much for your time and energy. I have a whole new appreciation for what you do for our community. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sean.
Yeah. Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks.
Take care.